Friends, today in this video we will discuss the new section 194Q, which came into being in the Finance Act 2021, which is related to tax deducted at source on purchase of goods and not to the provision of services. So the question is, what we have to see here is section 194Q applies to whom. So this is the first question may come in your mind. Section 194Q applies to a buyer in the following cases. A buyer whose turnover or gross receipt or sales in the immediately preceding financial year was more than 10 crore, and a buyer is responsible for making payment of a sum to the resident seller, and such payment is to be done for the purchase of goods of the value aggregate of the value exceeding 50 lakh. Such payment is to be done for the purchase of goods of the value or aggregate of the value exceeding 50 lakh. So, in that case, section 194Q applies. Suppose in a financial year ended on March 31st, 2021, a buyer whose turnover was more than 10 crore in that year needs to deduct TDS from their resident seller on the purchase of goods above rupees 50 lakh in the current financial year 21-22. So now what should be the rate of TDS? The main question is, the tax is to be deducted at source at the rate of 0.1% on the amount exceeding rupees 50 lakh in a financial year from its seller from whom the buyer has purchased goods worth more than 50 lakh. So now how to calculate TDS? TDS to be calculated on purchase above 50 lakh in a financial year from seller. TDS to be deducted after deduction of 50 lakh from the total value of purchases. The threshold limit is 50 lakh, which means seller wise deduction in every financial year. So we can draw an example here. Let's say a buyer purchases goods worth rupees 20 lakh 3 times each from a seller, meaning he bought total of rupees 60 lakhs. Now he has to deduct rupees 50 lakh from the total value of goods purchased. The TDS has to be deducted only on 10 lakh at the rate of 0.1%. Okay, so now the second space we have to understand here the application of section 194Q. Section 194Q of the IT Act is applicable from July 1st, 2021. So the TDS has to be deducted only on purchases after July 1, 2021. However, the threshold limit of purchase of the rupees 50 lakh has to be taken into account from 1st April 2021. It's clear? Suppose if a buyer has purchased goods worth rupees 20 lakh from a seller, then he has to deduct the first rupees 50 lakh from it as an initial deduction under section 194Q. Then deduct the TDS on the remaining rupees 30 lakh at 0.1%. So the TDS applicable in this case would be rupees 3000. So role of GST. Calculation of turnover excluding GST. Calculation of TDS at the rate of 0.1% including GST. When to deduct TDS? The TDS is to be deducted at a time when such amount is credited to the seller or paid to him, whichever is earlier. I repeat again, the TDS is to be deducted at a time when such amount is credited to the seller or paid to him, whichever is earlier. In other words, if you have not paid any advance amount, then you have to deduct this TDS at the time of purchase of goods. However, if you have made an advance payment, then you have to deduct TDS immediately. The same rules in case of PAN, non-furnishing of PAN, and other cases also as it is. In cases where seller fails to furnish a permanent account number to buyer, the TDS would be deducted at the rate of 5% instead of 0.1%. It is important to note that without PAN information, the rate of tax applicable in other cases is 20%. In case of section 194Q, the TDS rate is 5%. The due date of TDS deposit. The TDS is to be deducted on or before the 7th day of the month following the month in which TDS is deducted. For example, the deduction month is January, the due date of payment is February 7th. However, in the case of March, the TDS can be deposited up to April 30. So what are the returns to be furnished for TDS under section 194Q? The form is 26Q for a quarter ending 30th June, September 30, December 31st and March 31st. The due date of filing TDS return is July 31st, October 31st, January 31st, May 31st respectively. There are some exceptions in this case also. Section 194Q would not apply in cases where the TDS is to be deducted on the transaction of a purchase under any other provision of the IT Act. For example, there may be a cases where a purchase transaction comes under section 194Q as well as 194O as well as 194Q, then TDS would apply as per section 194O, which relates to TDS on e-commerce transaction. However, there is an exception in the case of section 206C1H, which provides for the collection of tax by a seller for the amount received as consideration for the sale of goods if it is greater than 50 lakh in any previous year. If any transaction on purchase of goods attracts TDS under 194Q as well as tax collected at source under section 206C1H, then only section 194Q shall apply in such cases. Thank you. This is all about 194Q. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for watching this video. Keep in tune. We shall have a new